I hope you enjoyed just that silly little video talking about the ASH study, and that's something if you want to go back and just look and read up on the ASH studies. Just conformity to me is just so interesting, and next week when we talk about groupthink, some of that will figure in as well. But let's cover deviant workplace behavior. That's voluntary behavior that violates significant organizational norms, and in doing so threatens the well-being of the organization or its members. It is likely to flourish where it's supported by group norms. So we know that if the group norms accept deviant behavior, and that's behavior outside the norm of what's going to happen, then individuals in that group are more likely to exhibit that type of behavior. And really, simply being a part of a group may increase an individual's deviant behavior, and this may be due to the shield of anonymity that you being a part of a group, or that person being a part of a group, does that. And again, when we're talking about deviant workplace behavior, we're not talking about a lot of times horrific types of situations, but we're talking about goofing off at work, playing games on your computer, or looking at Facebook during the day, or jumping on a forklift and causing an accident. So it's just trying to, when the norms though are established and where people feel comfortable, then a lot of times they will participate in that. But let's talk about status. And when we look at status, it is a socially defined position or rank given to groups or group members by others. Even the smallest groups are going to develop roles. They're going to develop roles, they're going to develop rights, rituals to differentiate its members. And status is a significant motivator and has major behavioral consequences when individuals perceive a disparity in what they believe their status to be and what others perceive it to be. And so we know that there is status characteristics theory, and according to that theory, status develops into a hierarchy, meaning that somebody is over someone. You always have somebody on the top, but then there's always somebody on the bottom. And we know that with status and what determines it, it's really the power that a person has or wields over the other. And the more power that an individual has, the higher his or her status is within that group. And we'll talk in a little about, what determines status. There's knowledge a lot of times has to do with that. So there's a lot of reason that someone has status over the other. It can be a person's ability to contribute to a group's goals. People whose contributions are critical to the group's success tend to have higher status. So they bring a lot to the table. Maybe that's the accountant in the group whenever you're in a class where you need numbers. Maybe it is an accounting class or an economics class, so their status goes up. Or if you're that English major, when you're in a class where there's high writing content, then your status goes up. And then a lot of times what determines status is just that individual's personal traits. When a group positively values certain personal characteristics, and it may be that someone's just the person that everyone likes. I mean, that happens sometimes. It's just that charismatic type of personality. So those people also who have those traits receive high status. So we know with status and norms, we know that high status members of groups often have more freedom. They can deviate from the norms. So they're just those people that are allowed to get away with things that other people would not get away with, so long as this deviance isn't detrimental to the group's goal. We also know that high status members are more likely or better able to resist conformity pressure and less likely to be motivated by the need for social rewards. Also, interaction among members of group is really influenced by status and how well you get along. But when inequity is perceived, the results in various types of corrective behavior. People don't like to be that person. They don't want that status inequity. and that can develop conflicts through it. It can be that they might agree on certain things, but they really will, they'll, what's the word I want for it, buck up and not really want that person to get away with it. It's almost like when you have, well, it is when you have children, and if you've had children, you understand the phrase, it's not fair. Well, it's not, because high status members are able to get away with certain things that other people in the group would not be able to get away with. We also know that cultural differences, that affects status as well. And the importance of status varies between cultures, as do the criteria of what creates culture. And status cues are a lot of times, they're misinterpreted if you're doing business internationally. And I don't know if any of you have ever done that or worked internationally, but it is extremely different when I've gone into different countries and dealing with them, especially, I've done business in France and done business in Italy. And in France, completely different than it is from Italy. And so and again, different from the United States as well. So how does size affect a group? Well, it does, because group size does affect the overall behavior. It is contingent upon which dependent variables are being examined. Smaller groups, we know, are quicker and they can complete tasks faster than larger groups, but we know that individuals perform better in smaller groups as well, but larger groups are consistently better at problem solving. We also know large group, and that's a dozen or more members, are good at generating diverse input, while smaller groups are effective at producing something from that input. So groups of approximately 7 members tend to be more effective for taking action. And that leads us to really the last thing that I'm going to talk about this week is social loafing. And I don't know if any of you have experienced that before in a group. Social loafing is a tendency to expend less effort in a group than as an individual. And so we know that that the group's effort is not equal to the sum of efforts of all the individuals in that group. So not everyone is going to perform at the highest standard that they can. Group performance does increase with group size, but the addition of new members to the group really has diminishing returns on productivity. And what causes social loafing? Well, there's a number of possible causes. When we talk about equity theory, and I don't know if any of you have investigated that, but I teach that when I teach organizational theory. And the equity theory is people want everything to be equal within the group. But we know that people can hide and they can blend and absorb into the group, and maybe, and a lot of times not exert as much energy in that group. And what happens is, you don't have to, the results of the group don't have to be attributed to a single individual. So what happens is it gets cloudy of when we go to try to measure it is everyone pulling their weight. But I can tell you, no one likes a social loafer. So don't be that person in the group. All right, this is going to wrap up the lectures for this first week. I hope you guys have gotten some valuable information. We will pick up next week. I've got a forum post for you to complete after this, talking about group behavior. And I look forward again to having you in class. And again, this wraps up our week 1 lecture.